Welcome to Theology for the People. My name is Nick Cady, and in this episode, I'm joined by Pastor Ray Ortlund. Ray has served in pastoral ministry for decades. He now leads Renewal Ministries, which is a nonprofit that was founded by his parents. Today, we're talking about his latest book. It's called Good News at Rock Bottom, and it was born out of Ray's own personal experience of pain and discovering the hope of the gospel in those low places. The whole book centers around the exposition of one verse, Isaiah 57, verse 15. And this verse speaks powerfully to those who find themselves in the midst of betrayal, loneliness, regret, and even those facing death. This episode is filled with a lot of encouragement. That's Ray's specialty. So if you are ever wondering if God can still find you in a deep place in the valley, Ray reminds us that God not only dwells in the highest of heights, but he dwells and meets us at the lowest point, not with shame, but with healing, his presence, and with his grace. So here's the conversation. Well, Ray, thanks so much for being a guest on Theology for the People.
I'm glad to be with you, Nick. Thank you.
Ray, for anybody who doesn't know you or isn't familiar with your ministry, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, where you serve, what's been your journey up until this point.
Sure. Grew up in a magnificent Christian home in a healthy church. I took it for granted. I thought that's just the way reality is. I had no idea how privileged I was. Married a great woman, had fantastic kids. And then serving in a church in my 50s, I was finally initiated into the reality that most of the human race is slogging through at this very moment. And that was really good for me. It made me a better man, made me a better pastor. So now I'm serving with Renewal Ministries, which is the nonprofit my dad and mom handed down to us. And it's such a privilege. But I wrote this book, Good News at Rock Bottom, because when I was at rock bottom, I needed good news. And I did not know what to think. I was bewildered. I was even terrified. So.
Yeah, when I picked up the book, I was really intrigued by the fact that the whole book is really based on one passage of scripture and expositing it from various angles. So the passage is Isaiah 57, verse 15. And I'll read it, and then if you wouldn't mind just telling me what it means to you, why this passage, and maybe talk about it. I would love to hear more from your heart about it. So it says this, For thus says the one who is high and lifted up, who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place, and also with him who is of a contrite and lowly spirit, to revive the spirit of the lowly, and to revive the heart of the contrite. So, yeah, talk to me about that passage.
Well, here's why I love that verse. It's really the whole biblical message boiled down to one verse. The Bible is not written to spiritual high achievers who want to polish up their performances and move from, 7 or 8 on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe to 9, even a 10. The Bible is written to devastated people. The verse refers to the contrite and lowly. Those words might sound kind of pious, but he's talking about crushed and devastated people. So we don't need to go looking for it. It comes and finds us inevitably. When, not if, when we find ourselves among the crushed and devastated, where do we go find God when we really need him and everything is on the line? Where do we go to find God? This verse tells us that God has, if I could put it this way, 2 addresses. And one says, the verse says he inhabits eternity. It says, I dwell in the high and holy place. So God has an address in the high and holy place in his heavenly palace where we cannot go. He has another address, surprisingly, way down low among the crushed and devastated at rock bottom. The angels in heaven above aren't wondering where God is. He is so present. The crushed and devastated, way down low, don't have to wonder where God is. He is so present. His door is unlocked. The welcome mat is out. We can knock. He will open it up and invite us in. When I hit rock bottom some years ago, Nick, I felt like honesty demanded that I rethink everything, starting with, does God love me or does God hate me? It felt like God hated me.
Mm.
I wondered, if God hates my guts, that would explain everything. But what have I done that is so horrible to make him hate me? I mean, I had to go down to the most primal level and rethink reality from the ground up. And it turned out to be a breakthrough experience for me. Now I'm thankful.
Mm.
And whenever I meet somebody who is down there at rock bottom, I kind of just want to put my arm around their shoulder and tell them, "Oh, you're my new best friend."
Well, that experience of being at rock bottom, like you said, that's where God meets us. And but what would you say to somebody who says, you know what, I don't know, like I'm not at rock bottom. Like, what do I do if I want to meet God and I'm not experiencing a crisis in my life right now?
Yeah. I don't see in the scripture where the Bible says you always have to be in the intensity of mega crisis. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So there are crisis moments, but what the rock bottom experience did for me is I didn't stay at rock bottom in terms of my psychology and my sense of urgency and moment by moment crisis. But it did change me permanently in that I now have an understanding I didn't have before, a sense of solidarity with people I didn't have before, and the best sense and empathy. Some people don't like empathy anymore. I totally disagree. It made me a better pastor.
Hmm.
Because I realized seeing the people come into church on a Sunday morning, 90% of those people are crushed and devastated. We've just learned how to put a smile on that on the outside. But deep within, there's so much disappointment and even anguish. I mean, many of our listeners know exactly what I'm talking about when I say, we're wondering, okay, my heart is still beating. I'm still living, but why? What's the point? Am I stuck now with a plan B existence? Am I just, do I have to do I have to settle for this wretchedness for the rest of my days? This was not what I had in mind when I was a senior in high school.
Mm.
And we all get there. We all wonder, wow, so this is it? Okay. Yeah. So let's come together and go to Jesus together and find out what he can do for people like us.
Mm. Yeah, I've heard it said that if you preach to hurting hearts, you'll never lack an audience. And I found that to be true. So in the book, you describe, I think, see, 4 ways that you describe that would be experiences of rock bottom. So you describe betrayal, being trapped. I'd love to hear more about that. Being lonely. And then the last one, which actually surprised me, it was my favorite chapter of all, was dying. Was this book, I mean, was it born out of a sermon series? I think that's what I read in the preface that you preached.
Well, not a sermon series, but at Emmanuel Church in Nashville, we have a Wednesday night kind of interactive, discussional sort of teaching experience with whoever shows up. And I field tested these ideas in that setting. And I was struck by it. I mean, because something special was happening in the room that I didn't plan. I didn't cook it up, but the Lord was there.
Mm.
And there was something sacred happening. There was healing going on. It was honest and tender. So with the encouragement of Sam Alberry, who stewards that ministry, leads that ministry, I thought, well, maybe I should write this down and put it into a book.
Mm.
That's where it came from.
Yeah, that's really good. So could you tell me a little bit more? You've alluded to it already, but would you mind describing a little bit more about your own rock bottom experience? You mentioned being in your 50s. What was happening in your life prior to that, and then what led to this crisis?
Well, my whole life is a gift of God's grace. I think every one of us can say that. Moment by moment, the grace of God is coming down and touching me. That doesn't mean every moment is a zippity-doo-dah joyride.
Mm-hmm.
But it does mean I'm never God-forsaken. So that's been my life all along. I did have an experience in my 50s where I put my trust in some people. We split our wrists, so to speak, became blood brothers. I thought I trusted them, gave them my heart. I thought they trusted me, gave me their heart, and I found out too late that really wasn't happening. Something else was going on. And it became, that's why there's the chapter on betrayal in there.
Mm.
We all experience betrayal at some point along the way. We get our hearts deeply broken. And that's when, as I said earlier, I had to rethink everything from the ground up, which was good.
Mm.
It was really hard, really scary, took a long time, and it was good.
Mm.
And then the next chapter turns it around. You know, what about when I'm caught in my own sins, when I'm the one doing the betraying? And I find myself stuck in consequences and repercussions that I unleashed, but I can't control.
Mm-hmm.
And my life falls apart, and it's my own fault. That's the chapter on trapped. And I know what that's like too. We all do. Jesus said, he who sins is a slave of sin. We all know that's real. And the next chapter is about loneliness and isolation. And we more and more in America right now, especially among us men, as you know, Nick, loneliness is an epidemic. According to my reading, in the last 30 years or so, the incidence of especially male loneliness have, I think, quadrupled. That's my memory offhand, according to research,
mm-hmm.
which is astonishing. So we're more connected than ever. We have these smartphones that never shut up.
Mm-hmm.
And we're more lonely. How crazy is that? And lonely, man, that's a powerful form of rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I hate loneliness. It's misery. And then the last chapter is about both dying and everything that leads up to death. Just aging and increased frequency of trips to the doctor. Because bad things start happening. And it's like, I'm walking down the street, minding my own business. It's like body parts start falling off one by one. And there's less and less of me until there's nothing. And I just keel over, a battered old brontosaurus, and become extinct.
Mm.
That's the deepest rock bottom right there.
Mm-hmm.
And Nick, you and I, unless the Lord comes back first, you and I are going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, I read somewhere that during the 1800s, during the Victorian era, Sex was the taboo subject, but death, people talked about freely. They put it right out on the table. They weren't afraid to talk about it. We have flipped that. In our world, we never stop talking about sex.
Mm-hmm.
And death is the taboo subject. It's like, so even when we have a funeral, we don't call it a funeral. We call it a celebration of life. And it becomes sort of chipper and upbeat and even giggly at times. Man alive.
Mm.
That's the gospel helps us to look death right in the face and laugh our fool heads off with a defiant cheerfulness by faith in Christ. Let's not be afraid.
Mm-hmm. I read that chapter on death just on an airplane, actually, while I was coming back to the U.S. And I had just gotten the news that a dear woman from our church had passed away. She's somebody that we'd been walking through, her cancer journey and praying for her. And she died. And I read that chapter. And so it was especially poignant to me at that time. But I just, I loved some of the quotes that you used. You mentioned John Wesley, and he has this quote where he says, "Our people die well. And the world may find fault with our opinions, but they can't deny the fact that our people die well." Or I love this other quote, what can earth do to you if you're guaranteed heaven? To fear the worst earthly loss would be like a millionaire fearing the loss of a penny, or even less, a scratch on a penny. I thought it's just so empowering.
Isn't that great?
Mm.
If Jesus rose from the dead, and he did, then not only, Nick, are you and I going to rise from the dead. And of course, the whole point of the resurrection is we get our bodies back. The gospel is not just about the immortality of the soul. The touchdown of the gospel is the resurrection of the body, the humblest part of us. Jesus died and rose again to save our bodies as well as our souls. You're going to get your body back. I'm going to get mine back better than before, better than when we were 18.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to, and not only are we going to get our bodies back, the risen Jesus, who is an embodied, he is the embodied new humanity right now. He is going to recreate the entire universe as a sparkling new cosmos. We're not going to be singing in massed choirs in clouds, and look like holograms. You're going to be you. I'm going to be me, body and soul, in a physical universe awash with resurrection life, thanks to Jesus alone.
Mm-hmm.
Bam. Sign me up, babe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on the topic of betrayal, I know that I've experienced it myself, and I'm curious to hear more from you on that topic because one of the things I've always told people, I say, if you stick around long enough, you're going to experience betrayal. And one of the things I've noticed is that for some people, betrayal is maybe one of the worst things you can experience in life. It's this experience of having someone know you, opening yourself up to a person, making yourself vulnerable, and then being stabbed in the back and oftentimes in the front as well. And I think that it causes some people to even question their faith in the Lord altogether. So
Yeah.
how do you survive betrayal, and how do you recover from it so that you don't just become like C.S. Lewis describes, right, where you lock your heart in a box and in that box it withers and dies?
Yeah. And maybe the worst part of betrayal is that the betrayer finds and even invents some reason why it's all your fault.
Mm.
It's like you deserved it. I mean, they have to find something. They need something bad to be true about you in order to justify themselves and what they did. So oh man. Yeah, it's horrible. Here's the reason why it's horrible, and here's the way through. The reason why it's horrible is that God created us in his image and likeness. A covenant-making, covenant-keeping, promise-making, promise-keeping God created us to be covenantal, promise-making, promise-keeping in our relationships with each other. That's how God is toward us, and we're created in his image. So what we do is we navigate reality covenantally with one another. That's the way it's supposed to work. So that Nick Cady and Ray Ortlund encounter one another on a podcast one afternoon. And what happens is we're entering into covenant together. We might not be thinking in these categories, but God is thinking in these categories all the time. So, Nick, when I get on the phone with you and connect with you by my computer, because I'm created in the image of God, you're created in the image of God, I literally owe you my best if I'm going to be faithful to covenantal living. When I walk into a room and there are people there, I owe them my best. They owe me their best. You owe me my best. All the friends that are listening right now, I owe all of you my best, the best I can bring to the table at this moment right now by God's grace for his glory. Now that's how God designed human existence. It's glorious. It's filled with solidarity. It's filled with friendship and beauty. And it's filled with courage and sacrifice and so forth. Now, obviously, it's also rare because we are so fallen. And we can perceive relationships, we can perceive one another through a lens of cost-benefit calculation. That's when you become expendable. Maybe you might be useful to me for some selfish and grandiose purpose of my own, but you don't actually matter. You yourself don't matter. You are merely instrumental to my advantage. Now, that's not covenantal. That's the total denial of covenant living, and it's the total denial of God. And it's how this world runs. And even some Christians, even some churches, without even realizing it, are navigating reality by those ground rules. And that's when people get stepped on. That's when trust is betrayed. And the people who are getting crushed, then they get blamed for it because self-justification kicks in. So it's the glory for which God created us, Nick, that makes betrayal so shocking at a deep intuitive level.
How do we recover from betrayal? How did you recover from it?
Oh, great question. Slowly. You know, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, a wonderful, very, very wise man, a counselor, several years after this difficulty. And he said, "How are you doing about that?" And I said, "Well, I'm embarrassed to admit to you that it still eats at me." He said 3 words: God is patient. Oh, man. I needed to hear that. So how do you get through it? Hope. Hope in God. Patient, faithful, steady, covenant-keeping, present God. And other brothers and sisters who believe in that faithful God, just sticking together. Because in this verse, to revive the spirit of the lowly and to revive the heart of the contrite, in the original Hebrew text, the lowly and the contrite, the crushed and broken, the devastated, those are plural nouns. So this is a group. This is a community at rock bottom. So when we're there in that low place of devastation, let's look around, find out who else is there, and lock arms together in solidarity, look to the Lord and just take the next step, and then take the next step and just keep stumbling forward. If we're stumbling toward Jesus, that's progress. So we put our hope in God, and we stick together as believers in the living God. That's how we get through this. There is no easy way out, but that is the way through rock bottom.
How about we talk about this next one, being trapped? So we've talked about when we're the victims of betrayal. What happens in the other case when we're the ones who are trapped in our own sin and folly? We maybe have betrayed someone, or we've betrayed the Lord, our fidelity to the Lord. What are some steps that we can take to start new patterns of living, to recover from that place?
Great question. Well, as I tried to explain in this book, there's no progress without becoming honest. We have to go back, face what we did honestly, and own up. And that means humbling ourselves and going back to people whom we have wronged. And it's not just a matter of hurting people's feelings. We don't want to do that, but I can get my feathers ruffled and it might even be my own fault. But when there's a difference between being hurt and being harmed, if I have harmed someone, wronged someone, betrayed their trust, violated their legitimate rights, I have got to confess that. And my confession has to be coextensive with the impact of the wrong. If it was a private wrong, a private confession will suffice. If it was a public wrong that was visible to others, then it needs to be a public confession. Confession of sin. There's no progress without confession of sin. And then the second thing is, then ask the person I've wronged, how can I make it right? Is there anything I can do that would help? And listen. And then by God's grace, for his glory, never do that again. But walk, as Romans chapter 6, verse 4 says, walk in newness of life. That's not talking about polished up, improved obedience. That's talking about unprecedented obedience, newness of life.
That's good. In your chapter on loneliness, I was surprised that you tied it to justification by faith. You said essentially one of the cures for loneliness is embracing the doctrine of justification by faith. Could you explain why you said that and what you mean by it?
Sure. Gosh, we modern Christians owe our Lutheran friends a huge debt of gratitude for just declaring that wonderful good news of justification by faith alone so clearly, so emphatically, so repeatedly. I want to shake Martin Luther's hand someday. Just thank him. Give him a big hug. Justification by faith alone, that doctrine means we all come in the same way. All these artificial gradations and conditionalities and levels of superiority and inferiority, all of that foolishness, it just gets swept away. And the stratification of our perception of others isolates us. That's why we end up so lonely. We think we're too far beneath others or too far above others. But what if the gospel teaches us we all come in the same way? It's not as though there's first class up front in the airliner going to heaven with prior boarding and extra leg room and everybody else is in the back and coach. It's all first class. And if that's true, it brings us together as friends. When the gospel of justification by faith alone captures a church, we look around at one another and we begin to discover all we have in common instead of all that differentiates us from one another. And when we discover how we have Christ in common, Christ alone, and he's enough to bring us together and keep us together, oh man, not only is there less loneliness, there's a whole lot more joy.
Are there any other scriptures that became meaningful to you, having experienced rock bottom, aside from Isaiah 57:15?
Well, I fell in love with the whole book of Psalms at a profound level, because the Psalms, half the Psalms are laments. They are get real moments for the saints of old. And they tell us, if your heart is lamenting loss, if you can barely breathe, if you don't know how to take your next step, the Psalms are saying, the psalmists are saying, we get it. Been there, done that. And it's not as though you have a sort of second-rate Christianity. This is a required course in God's curriculum for all of us. So we all go through the valley of the shadow of death. And so we're not alone. God understands us. God himself provides psalms that help us put words to our anguish. And we bring those sad words to God and offer them to him in lamentation, trusting him. And he receives those words. He doesn't despise them. It says here in Isaiah 57, he dwells among the contrite and lowly, to revive the spirit of the lowly, to revive the heart of the contrite. Revive meaning to give us fresh life, to breathe, to reoxygenate us. So the Psalter is a great place. It's like, when an NFL player runs off the field and sits down on the bench and he puts that plastic thing on his face to get oxygen and to recover more quickly. That's the book of Psalms right there.
Right on. What is one thing that you hope readers will take away? If somebody were to read this book, what's your greatest hope that someone would take away from this?
Yeah. Just that very thing, Nick, hope. That people would hope in God and not give up. Don't give up. It's too soon to quit. Your life is not over. God is with you. You're so not God forsaken. You're not abandoned. You're not forsaken. You're not contemptible in his sight. You are precious to him. He is near to you. It doesn't feel like it right now. We all go through that. You're not exceptional. Offer him your broken heart. And he receives your broken heart. And he will receive your broken heart tenderly, sincerely, respectfully, and he will help you take the next step. And that's all you need. It's just the hope, just enough hope to take the next step. And then God will give you enough hope to take the next step after that. And we'll get through this. We're going to make it. Let's put our hope in God and let's stick together. That's what so if this book helps somebody not despair, but keep going, then I'm happy.
Amen. Well, I hope it reaches a lot of people. Can I ask you a little bit about your hunting?
Well, I know it's ridiculous, Nick, but the truth of it is, well, maybe it isn't completely ridiculous, because what I do is I go out to the woods and the fields and I get up into a tree stand and I sit there and I sit still for a couple of hours and I'm quiet. And instead of looking at my phone, I'm looking at what God made. I'm looking at trees and the sky and clouds and colors. And I'm listening to the wind and I'm hearing animals make their strange little sounds. And every now and then a deer walks out, and that's a spike of adrenaline. And I see a raccoon walk by, and squirrels and robins and so forth. And it's so I come back feeling like a new man. It's therapeutic to be out from what I make and out into the setting of what God made. And I feel refreshed. So I love it.
Yeah, I started taking my son hunting a few years ago, and first of all, he loved it. It's like the only thing he wants to do. But the thing that made me so glad about doing it is, in a world where phones and devices are ubiquitous and just everywhere, when you're out hunting, you have to pay attention. And
Yes.
and you have to, it was so nice to like see my son and be with him and see him like focusing on, like you said, the smells, the sounds, and being in the land, walking, always listening, always watching.
Yes.
And yeah, there's just something about it that's so, yeah, wonderful. But our season for hunting is quite short here in Colorado. So, we've got a couple weeks in the fall when we can do it.
Oh,
How's your
wow.
season out there?
Oh, sounds like it's better here because bow season starts the fourth Saturday of September, muzzleloader the first Saturday of November, gun season starts the Saturday before Thanksgiving, and it goes into the first week of January.
Okay, I mean, it's not that different, but yeah, if you get a tag here, generally it's for about 1 week. But yeah, we do have muzzleloader season. Ours actually starts in September, a little bit earlier.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
yeah, our rifle season's in October and
It's so
November.
much
So
fun.
yeah, it's so good.
And it feeds people.
That's right. Yep. Well, I hope you have a successful hunting season this year. Are you just hunting locally or are you traveling this year?
Yeah, just locally. It'll be a
Nice.
blast. I hope you have a great deer season too, Nick.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah, we've got elk season and moose season out here in
Oh,
Colorado as well. So yeah,
nice.
hoping to pull that moose tag finally. We'll see what happens.
That would be great.
Well, thank you so much, Ray. Really appreciate you sharing about your book and about this incredible verse in Isaiah 57, verse 15.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Theology for the People. In upcoming episodes, I'll be interviewing Brett McCracken. We'll also have other guests and interesting topics, so make sure to stay tuned. New episodes are being released on Mondays this season, so make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, and that way you'll be notified when new episodes come out. Also, make sure to check out the Theology for the People YouTube page, the TikTok channel. If you'd like to support this podcast, one of the best ways you can do that is by sharing this episode with somebody else. That helps the podcast grow, and as it grows, more and more people get to interact with these theological topics. So I would be blessed if you do that. Also, leave a rating and review, a like on any of these episodes across whatever platform you use. And until next time, thanks for listening and God bless you.